My wife just told me that girls' night is more sacred than our marriage and that her friends will be here when I'm gone. Let me tell you exactly how that conversation went down, because what happened next changed everything. I walked through our front door after a regular Tuesday at work, keys jingling as I set them on the kitchen counter. The house smelled like that expensive perfume she only wore for special occasions. That should have been my first clue. She was in the bedroom, standing in front of our full-length mirror, applying mascara with the kind of precision she used to reserve for our date nights. Black dress, heels that made her 3 inches taller, hair styled like she was heading to some upscale event. Going somewhere nice tonight? I asked, loosening my tie. Girls' night, she said without looking away from her reflection. We're hitting that new rooftop bar downtown. This was the 4th girls' night in 3 weeks. I wasn't keeping score to be controlling, but when your wife spends more time getting dolled up for her friends than she has for you in the past 2 months, you start noticing patterns. Maybe this weekend we could do something together, I suggested, sitting on the edge of our bed. It's been a while since we had a proper date night. She turned around, and the look she gave me could have frozen hell over. Seriously? You're going to guilt-trip me about spending time with my friends? I'm not guilt-tripping anyone. I'm just saying it would be nice to spend some quality time with my wife. She set down her makeup brush with more force than necessary. You know what? I'm tired of this conversation. Girls' night is sacred to me. These women have been in my life longer than you have, and they'll be here long after you're gone. Marriage is just a piece of paper, but real friendship? That's forever. The words hit me like a physical blow, not because they hurt my feelings, but because they revealed something I'd been trying not to see for months. She wasn't just prioritizing her friends over our marriage. She was actively dismissing our entire relationship as meaningless. I stood up slowly, my mind suddenly crystal clear. Is that really how you feel? I asked, keeping my voice level. Yes, it is. And if you can't handle that, maybe you should think about what that means. She grabbed her purse from the dresser, checked her phone, and headed for the bedroom door. Don't wait up. We'll probably be out late. I watched her walk away, heard her heels clicking on our hardwood floors, heard the front door slam shut with a finality that seemed to echo through the house. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was clarifying. I sat back down on the bed and looked around our bedroom. Pictures of us from our wedding day sat on her nightstand, but they were partially blocked by bottles of nail polish and jewelry she'd bought for herself. My side of the room was neat, organized, respectful of our shared space. Her side looked like a tornado had hit a department store. Everything suddenly made sense. The late nights out, the way she'd stopped asking about my day, how she'd started treating our home like a hotel and me like a roommate she barely tolerated. The way she lit up when talking about her friends, but barely looked up from her phone when I tried to start a conversation. Marriage is just paper. Her friends will be here when I'm gone. Well, she was about to find out just how quickly that paper could disappear and just how much those friends were really worth when the bills started piling up. I pulled out my phone and started making a mental list. Bank accounts, utilities, mortgage payments, insurance policies. All the practical things she'd never bothered to learn about because I'd always handled them. If she wanted to live like she was single, she was about to get exactly what she asked for. The ironic part? She'd probably blame me for being unreasonable, for not understanding her need for independence. But this wasn't about independence. This was about respect, and mine had just run out. I opened my laptop and started researching apartment listings in the next state over. Far enough away to start fresh, close enough to handle the divorce proceedings efficiently. She'd made her choice crystal clear. Now it was time to make mine. The house felt different after she left. Not empty, just honest. Like it was finally showing me what had been there all along. I closed my laptop and walked into the kitchen. Her coffee mug from this morning was still in the sink, lipstick stain on the rim. I'd been washing her dishes every day for 3 years, and she'd never once said thank you. I used to think that was just how marriage worked. You do things for each other without expecting praise. Now I realized I was the only one doing anything. I opened our junk drawer and pulled out the stack of bills and financial documents I kept organized there. Electric bill, water, internet, mortgage, car insurance, health insurance, streaming services, grocery expenses. Every single one was in my name or showed me as the primary account holder. She'd never even asked to see our monthly budget. This wasn't a decision I was making in anger. Anger would have been yelling at her before she left or texting her nasty messages while she was out. This was something colder and more final. This was acceptance. I grabbed a legal pad from my desk and started writing down everything that needed to be handled. Bank account numbers, passwords, contact information for utilities. Things she'd need to know if she wanted to keep living here after I was gone. My phone buzzed. A text from my brother asking if I wanted to grab drinks this weekend. I stared at it for a moment, then typed back. Actually, I might need some help moving furniture on Saturday. You free? He responded immediately. Everything okay? We'll explain later. Just need some muscle. You got it. I set the phone down and continued my list. The methodical nature of it was almost calming, like organizing a business plan, except the business was dismantling my marriage. I walked through the house room by room, mentally cataloging what was mine, what was hers, and what we'd bought together. The leather couch in the living room, mine from my bachelor days. The decorative pillows covering it, hers. The 65-inch TV, bought it with my bonus last year. The coffee table books about interior design, definitely hers. In the garage, my tools hung neatly on the pegboard I'd installed. Power drill, circular saw, socket wrench set, toolbox. All mine. The exercise bike gathering dust in the corner. Hers, bought during her New Year's resolution phase that lasted exactly 3 weeks. Back in the bedroom, I opened my dresser drawers. My clothes were folded and organized by type. Her drawers looked like laundry had exploded inside them. I pulled out a duffel bag from the closet and started packing essentials. Work clothes for the next few days, toiletries, important documents, laptop. I wasn't running away. I was making a strategic withdrawal. My phone rang. Her ringtone. I looked at it vibrating on the bedside table and let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, it rang again. I declined the call. The voicemail notification popped up. I played it. Hey, it's me. Look, I think we should talk when I get home. Maybe I was a little harsh earlier. Call me back. A little harsh. Like telling your husband that your marriage is meaningless paper was just a minor communication error. I deleted the voicemail and blocked her number. The house phone rang 15 minutes later. Unknown number, but I knew it was her calling from the bar. I unplugged the phone from the wall. I spent the rest of the evening packing systematically. Not everything. That would take too long and create too much drama. Just the essentials and the things that mattered most to me. Photo albums from before we met, my grandfather's watch, books I'd collected over the years, my good suits, electronics. Everything else could stay. Let her figure out how to maintain a household on her own. Let her learn what it costs to run a house when you don't have someone else handling all the practical stuff while you're out living your best life with your friends. Around midnight, I loaded the first round of boxes into my car. The neighbor's porch light was on, and I wondered if they'd heard us arguing earlier. Not that it mattered. By tomorrow afternoon, I'd be someone else's neighbor. I found a 24-hour storage unit facility across town and rented a unit online. Small space, month-to-month lease, access code sent to my phone. I drove over and unloaded the boxes, then came back for another load. By 3 a.m., I'd moved most of my personal belongings out of the house. What remained were the bigger items I'd need help with: furniture, electronics, anything too heavy for one person. I sat in my car in our driveway, looking at the house where I'd lived for 3 years. The place where I'd thought we were building a life together. The windows were dark, and it looked smaller somehow, less significant. My phone showed 6 missed calls from unknown numbers and 2 text messages from her friends' phones. I didn't read them. She'd be home in a few hours, expecting to find me waiting up like some pathetic husband ready to apologize for wanting to spend time with his wife. Instead, she was going to find something much more interesting. I started the engine and drove to a hotel near the interstate. Checked in, got a room with a view of the parking lot, and set my alarm for 8 a.m. Tomorrow was going to be a busy day. The hotel alarm went off at 8 a.m. sharp. I'd been awake for 30 minutes already, staring at the ceiling and running through my checklist. No second thoughts, no emotional breakdowns, just cold efficiency. First stop, the bank. I walked into our local branch at 9 a.m. when they opened. The teller knew me by name. I've been coming here for years to handle our joint accounts. Morning. I need to close my joint checking and savings accounts and transfer my half to a new individual account. She looked confused. Both accounts? Is your wife coming in to sign as well? No, she's not. According to the account agreements, either party can close joint accounts without the other's signature. I'd like to do that now. It took 45 minutes and a manager's approval, but I walked out with a cashier's check for my half of our savings and a new checking account with only my name on it. The joint accounts were officially closed. Next, utilities and services. I spent the morning on the phone, removing my name from every shared bill. electric company, water, gas, internet, cable, cell phone plan. Since most of them were in my name as the primary account holder, I had to transfer them to her name instead of just removing myself. Sir, we'll need to run a credit check on the new account holder, the electric company representative told me. That's fine. Do whatever you need to do. Some of the transfers would take a few days to process. She'd get notification letters in the mail explaining that the accounts were being moved to her name and that she'd need to set up new payment methods. The mortgage was trickier. I couldn't just remove my name without her signature, but I could stop making payments. I called the mortgage company and removed the automatic payment from my bank account. They'd send late notices to both of us, but that was her problem now. By noon, I was back at the house. Her car wasn't in the driveway. Either she was still passed out somewhere from her sacred girls' night, or she was having breakfast with her friends, complaining about her unreasonable husband. My brother showed up with his pickup truck right on schedule. So what's the story? He asked, looking at the house. She told me last night that her friends are more important than our marriage and that marriage is just paper. So I'm giving her exactly what she wants, a chance to live without the burden of that paper. He whistled low. Damn, and you're not going to try counseling or talking it out. You can't counsel someone who fundamentally doesn't respect you. Help me with the couch. We worked efficiently. Leather couch, coffee table, my desk from the home office, dresser from the bedroom, 65-inch TV, and entertainment center. I left her the bedroom furniture since most of it had been hers anyway. Two of my buddies from work showed up around 2 p.m. with another truck. Word travels fast when someone needs help moving, especially when there's drama involved. But they didn't ask questions, just helped load boxes and furniture. The hardest part was the kitchen. We'd received most of the appliances and cookware as wedding gifts. I took what I needed to cook basic meals and left the rest. The expensive knife set her mother had given us, the stand mixer she'd never used, the fancy dinnerware we only brought out for guests, all staying behind. I walked through each room one final time, collecting the last of my personal items. My books from the shelves in the living room, leaving gaps like missing teeth. My framed college diploma from the hallway. The power tools from the garage. In our bedroom closet, I took my suits, dress shirts, and shoes. Left behind were 3 years' worth of pictures on her nightstand, the decorative throw pillows she loved, her collection of scented candles that I'd always found overwhelming. The wedding album was on the bookshelf in our bedroom. I picked it up, flipped through a few pages of us looking happy and hopeful, then set it back down. She could keep the memories. I was more interested in the future. By 4 p.m., the house looked completely different. Not empty, but hollow, like a stage set missing half the props. I stood in the living room, looking at the gaps where my furniture had been. The walls had lighter rectangles where my framed pictures had hung. Her decorative items looked sparse and random without my stuff to balance them out. My brother loaded the last box into his truck. Where are you taking all this? Storage unit for now. I'm driving to my cousin's place in North Carolina tonight. He's got a guest house I can use while I figure out my next move. That's 8 hours away. Good. Far enough that I won't be tempted to come back and try to fix something that can't be fixed. I did one final walkthrough, checking that I hadn't forgotten anything important. In the kitchen, I left her a folder on the counter with all the utility account information, contact numbers, and due dates. A comprehensive guide to maintaining the household she'd never bothered to learn about. I wasn't being cruel. I was being practical. She wanted independence from our marriage, but she'd need these details to actually be independent. The garage door opener remote went on the kitchen counter next to the folder. House keys on the keyring that used to hold both our car keys. My nameplate from the mailbox went into my pocket. I loaded my suitcases into my car and started the engine. The house looked smaller in my rearview mirror, like it was already fading into the past. My phone had been buzzing all day with calls from unknown numbers. I'd stopped checking them hours ago. As I merged onto the interstate heading south, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Relief. Not the kind of relief you get from ending an argument, but the deeper kind that comes from finally stopping trying to fix something that was never going to work. The GPS said 7 hours and 43 minutes to my destination. I had a full tank of gas, a trunk full of everything that mattered to me, and absolutely no intention of looking back. She'd wanted to know what it felt like when friends were more important than marriage. She was about to get a very expensive education. Before I left town, I had one final task to complete. I pulled into a gas station about 10 miles from the house and bought a simple greeting card from their limited selection. Nothing sentimental or dramatic, just a plain white card with "Thank you" printed on the front. Perfect for what I had in mind. I sat in my car and wrote carefully in black ink. "You said girls' night is sacred and marriage is just paper. You said your friends will be here when I'm gone, and that marriage doesn't mean anything to you. You were right about one thing. I am gone. While you're reading this, I'm already far away. Good thing you have your friends to help with rent and all your expenses now. The utility companies will be contacting you about transferring the accounts to your name. All the information you need is in the folder on the kitchen counter. You wanted to live like you were single. Now you can. Don't try to contact me. This isn't a negotiation or a cry for attention. This is me taking you at your word and giving you exactly what you said you wanted. Enjoy your sacred girls' nights." I read it over twice, making sure the tone was matter-of-fact rather than angry. No insults, no emotional manipulation, no threats. Just a clear explanation of cause and effect. I drove back to the house one last time. Her car still wasn't in the driveway, which meant she was probably having brunch somewhere, nursing a hangover and laughing with those sacred friends about whatever drama had happened the night before. I walked through the front door and immediately noticed how different everything looked and felt. The missing furniture created an echo that hadn't been there before. Her remaining belongings looked scattered and temporary, like someone had started moving out but given up halfway through. In our bedroom, I placed the card on top of the dresser where she'd see it immediately. The same dresser that used to hold both our jewelry boxes, both our watches, both our personal items. Now it held just her things, and they looked lonely sitting there by themselves. I took one last look around the room where we'd slept together for 3 years. The bed looked too big for one person. The empty space where my nightstand used to be created an awkward gap. Even her decorative pillows seemed out of place without the balance of my more practical bedding. The master bathroom told the same story. Her makeup and skincare products covered most of the counter space, but the absence of my toothbrush, razor, and cologne left obvious gaps. The medicine cabinet held only her prescriptions and supplements. I walked back through the house, not feeling sentimental, just observant. The living room looked unbalanced without my furniture. The kitchen seemed too quiet without the hum of appliances that were no longer my responsibility to maintain. The home office was completely empty except for a desk lamp I'd forgotten to pack. This wasn't the home of a married couple anymore. It was the apartment of a single woman who'd been living with a roommate she didn't appreciate until he moved out. I left my house key on the kitchen counter next to the utility folder and walked out the front door for the final time. I didn't slam it or pause dramatically on the threshold. I just closed it like I would any other door and walked away. The drive to North Carolina gave me 8 hours to think, but not about whether I was making the right decision. That question had been answered the moment she told me marriage was just paper. Instead, I thought about what came next. My cousin had offered his guest house indefinitely while I figured out my next move. It was a small place, but it had everything I needed: bedroom, kitchen, office space, and most importantly, peace and quiet. No one there would tell me that our relationship was meaningless while getting dressed up to spend time with other people. Around hour 5 of the drive, my phone started buzzing with calls from unknown numbers again. I'd turn off notifications, but I could see the screen lighting up every few minutes. Part of me was curious about what kind of panic was happening back home, but not curious enough to actually listen. She'd made it very clear that her friends were her priority and that I was expendable. Well, now she had the full attention of those friends without the distraction of a husband who expected basic respect and consideration. I stopped for dinner at a roadside diner in rural Virginia, the kind of place with checkered floors, handwritten menus, and coffee that could wake the dead. An older couple sat in the booth across from me, sharing a piece of pie and talking quietly about their grandchildren's upcoming visit. That's what I thought marriage looked like. Two people who chose each other every day, who made each other a priority, who built something together instead of just existing in the same space while pursuing separate lives. Maybe I'd find that someday with someone else. Maybe I wouldn't. But I definitely wasn't going to find it with someone who thought commitment was optional and respect was negotiable. I paid my check and got back on the road. 3 more hours to my new life. By the time I pulled into my cousin's driveway, it was almost midnight. He'd left the guest house unlocked with a note welcoming me and telling me to make myself at home. The place was small but clean, furnished with the basics, and completely quiet. I unpacked my suitcases and set up my laptop on the kitchen table. Tomorrow I'd start looking for job opportunities in the area, Maybe start over completely in a place where no one knew me as half of a couple that didn't work. For the first time in months, I went to sleep without wondering what time she'd come home or whether she'd bother to say goodnight. I just went to sleep, and I slept better than I had in years. I didn't witness what happened when she came home, but I got the full story later from my neighbor who lived across the street. Apparently, it was quite the show. She rolled up around 11 a.m. that Thursday morning, 3 hours after I'd crossed the North Carolina state line. According to what I heard, she was wearing the same black dress from the night before, carrying her heels in one hand and squinting against the sunlight like someone with a serious hangover. The first sign something was wrong probably hit her when she couldn't find her house key. She'd left it inside the night before, expecting me to be there to let her in like always. She had to use the spare key we kept hidden under a fake rock by the front steps. Then she walked into the house. My neighbor said the screaming started about 30 seconds later. Not crying or calling my name, actual screaming. The kind you hear when someone discovers their house has been robbed. Which, in a way, it had been. By me. Legally and completely. She ran from room to room, and I can picture exactly what she saw. The living room with rectangular marks on the carpet where my furniture used to sit. The entertainment center gone, leaving loose cables hanging from the wall. Half the books missing from the shelves, creating gaps like broken teeth. The bedroom would have been worse. My side of the closet completely empty. My dresser gone, leaving an awkward space and wall outlets with nothing plugged into them. The bathroom counter with obvious gaps where my stuff used to be. But the real moment of truth was when she found my note on the dresser. According to what I pieced together later, she read it 3 times before the reality sank in. Then she grabbed her phone and started calling me. When she got the message that my number was no longer in service, she tried texting. Messages failed to deliver. She ran to her laptop and tried messaging me on social media. Blocked on everything. Email bounced back as undeliverable because I'd already changed my address and set up filters. That's when the real panic set in. She called my brother first. He let it ring through to voicemail. She tried my work number, but I'd already called in and taken emergency family leave. She tried my parents, who told her politely that they supported my decision and wouldn't be sharing my contact information. By afternoon, she was calling everyone we knew mutually, trying to find someone who could reach me. Nobody could, because I'd been thorough about cutting all possible connections. The utility companies started calling her that same day. Apparently, her credit score wasn't good enough to qualify for the electric account without a deposit. Same with the gas company. The internet provider wanted 2 months up front because she had no previous payment history with them. She opened the folder I'd left on the kitchen counter and found every account number, every customer service phone number, every bit of information she'd need to keep the house running. Information she'd never bothered to learn in 3 years of marriage because I'd handled everything. The mortgage payment was due in 6 days. The car insurance was up for renewal. The water bill was overdue because she'd never known when bills arrived or how much they cost. Her sacred friends came over that evening for an emergency support session. I heard about this because one of them posted pictures on Instagram. They'd brought wine and takeout, thinking this was just another relationship drama that would blow over in a few days. But as they sat in the living room that now looked like a furniture store after a clearance sale, reality started setting in. This wasn't a fight or a temporary separation. This was a complete dismantling. She showed them my note, probably expecting sympathy and outrage on her behalf. Instead, according to what got back to me through mutual friends, there was an uncomfortable silence. Because they all remembered exactly what she'd said the night before about marriage being meaningless paper. One of them apparently asked if she'd tried calling me to apologize. She had to explain that apologizing wasn't an option because I'd made myself completely unreachable. Another friend suggested couples therapy. She had to admit that's hard to do when one half of the couple has moved to another state without leaving a forwarding address. The friend stayed until about midnight, but there was only so much wine and emotional support they could provide before they had to go back to their own lives, their own homes, their own actual responsibilities. She was left alone in a house that felt too big, too quiet, and too expensive for one person to maintain. The next morning brought more reality checks. The bank called to confirm that yes, the joint accounts had been legally closed and no, they couldn't reverse the transaction without the other account holder's consent, which they didn't have because the other account holder was me and I was gone. She tried hiring a private investigator to find me. He took her money and came back 3 days later with nothing. Turns out it's pretty easy to disappear when you plan it carefully and don't leave a digital trail for people to follow. By the end of the week, she'd received official letters from every utility company explaining that services would be disconnected if she didn't establish new accounts in her name with appropriate deposits. The amounts were staggering. Apparently, when you have no credit history with utility companies, they want serious money up front. Her Instagram posts from that period tell the whole story. They went from party pictures with her friends to increasingly desperate messages about working through a difficult time and learning who your real friends are when life gets hard. Because here's the thing about those sacred friends she valued more than our marriage. They had their own mortgages, their own bills, their own families to worry about. They couldn't help her figure out how to maintain a household she'd never bothered to understand. They couldn't explain why the water pressure was low or how to reset the circuit breaker when it tripped. They couldn't help her understand the difference between the mortgage payment and the property tax escrow, or why the garbage pickup had stopped when she forgot to put the bins out for 3 weeks straight. Most importantly, they couldn't replace the financial stability she'd taken for granted when someone else was handling all the practical aspects of adult life. 2 weeks after I left, she was facing a reality she'd never prepared for, being completely responsible for herself in a house she couldn't afford to maintain on her salary alone. And I was 800 miles away, sleeping soundly every night without wondering what time she'd come home or whether she'd remember to lock the doors behind her. 6 weeks later, I was sitting on the porch of my cousin's guest house, drinking coffee and scrolling through job listings on my laptop. The morning was quiet except for birds and the distant sound of a lawnmower. No drama, no tension, no wondering what mood someone would be in when they got home. My phone rang. Unknown number with my old area code. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "This is David," a man's voice said. "I'm a friend of your wife's family. She asked me to call you. She can hire a lawyer if she wants to communicate with me. Look, she just wants to talk. She realizes she made some mistakes and wants to work things out." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. Tell her I got her message loud and clear 6 weeks ago. Marriage is just paper, remember? Well, the divorce papers will be just as meaningless. Come on, man. Don't you think you're being a little extreme? Extreme would have been staying married to someone who told me her friends were more important than our relationship. This is just logical. I hung up and blocked the number. 2 weeks later, she tried a different approach. My brother called and said she'd contacted him, wanting to meet for coffee to explain her side of the story. "What did you tell her?" I asked. "That you're not interested in her side of the story. She had 3 years to show you what she thought of the marriage." Message received. Good answer. The divorce papers were filed 3 months after I left. No contest, no fighting over assets, no drawn-out legal battles. She kept the house she couldn't afford, and I kept my freedom and self-respect. I found out through mutual friends that she'd had to move back in with her parents after 4 months of trying to maintain the mortgage on her own. The sacred friends had eventually gotten tired of the constant financial drama and emotional support sessions. Apparently, when your social circle realizes you destroyed a good marriage because you thought friendship was more important than commitment, some of them start questioning your judgment about other things too. I landed a job with a construction company in Charlotte, managing commercial projects. Better pay than my old job, and I was working with people who understood the value of reliability and following through on commitments. 6 months after I left, I got a letter forwarded from my old address. It was from her, handwritten on nice stationery, probably something she'd bought specifically for this apology letter she thought would fix everything. I read the first paragraph, where she explained how sorry she was and how she'd learned so much about herself. Then I threw it away without finishing it. Some lessons are expensive, and some mistakes don't get second chances. She'd had every opportunity to treat our marriage like it mattered, and she'd chosen differently every single time. The last I heard, she was dating someone new, a guy she'd met through those same friends she'd prioritized over our marriage. According to what filtered back to me, she was trying really hard to prove she'd changed and learned from her mistakes. Maybe she had. Maybe she was treating him better than she'd treated me. Good for her, and good for him if that's true. But that wasn't my problem to solve anymore. I was building a life where I didn't have to compete for basic respect and consideration, where coming home was peaceful instead of stressful, where my priorities aligned with the people I chose to spend my time with. Some people think marriage is just paper. For them, divorce papers work just as well. The difference is knowing which one you deserve and having the backbone to act accordingly.